with these 5 vijnanas, the objective world is regarded as the reason of the differentiation and appearances are definitely prescribed. We have the manovijnana. Caused by this is the birth of the body or system of the vijnanas, pavika vijnanakaya. They do not, however, reflect thus. We, mutually dependent, come to get attached to the visible world which grows out of one's own mind and is discriminated by it. They i.e. the vijnanas and manovijnana rise simultaneously, mutually conditioning, and not broken up, but each taking in its own field of representations. The way the alaya vijnana works in our system of vijnanas is extremely subtle. And it is the privilege of the highly trained mind of the bodhisattva only that can fully grasp the inner significance of the alaya. Those who train themselves in tranquilization are not always conscious of the subtlety of the working of their habit energy. And they imagine that they enter into a perfect state of tranquilization by annihilating all the vijnanas. But the fact is, they have not annihilated the vijnanas, though they may be in a state of tranquilization, for their seeds of habit energy are not fully destroyed. What they have destroyed is simply the habit of grasping and discriminating the objective world of particulars. So subtle indeed, O Mahamati, is the working of the alaya vijnana that only the Tathagatas and those bodhisattvas who are already advancing through the stages of bodhisattvahood can penetrate into it. It is beyond the powers of the samadhi and prajna acquired by sravakas, pratyeka Buddhas, and philosophers. The functions of the 8 vijnanas. From the functional point of view, there are 8 vijnanas: alaya, manas, manovijnana, and the 5 sense vijnanas. But they may be grouped under 2 headings: Kyati vijnanas and Vastu Prativikalpa vijnana. Kyati, from kaya, means to perceive, to manifest, and this function of the vijnana is to perceive or to reflect things that appear before it, just as the mirror reflects all forms before it. This is the function of the alaya. It looks into itself, where all the memory of the beginningless past is preserved in a way beyond consciousness and ready for further evolution. But it has no active energy in itself. It never acts, it simply perceives. It is in this sense exactly like a mirror. It is again like the ocean, perfectly smooth with no waves disturbing its tranquility. And it is pure and undefiled, which means that it is free from the dualism of subject and object. For it is the pure act of perceiving, with no differentiation yet of the knowing one and the known. The waves, however, will be seen ruffling the surface of the ocean of alaya vijnana when the principle of individuation known as vishaya blows over it like the wind. The waves thus started are this world of particulars where the intellect discriminates, the affection clings, and passions and desires struggle for existence and supremacy. This particularizing agency sits within the system of vijnanas and is known as manas. In fact, it is when manas begins to operate that a system of the vijnanas manifests itself. They are thus called object discriminating vijnana. The function of manas is essentially to reflect upon the alaya and to create and to discriminate subject and object from the pure oneness of the alaya. The memory accumulated in the latter is now divided into dualities of all forms and all kinds. This is compared to the manifoldness of waves that stir up the ocean of the alaya. Manas is an evil spirit in one sense and a good one in another, for discrimination in itself is not evil, is not necessarily always false judgment or wrong reasoning. But it grows to be the source of great calamity. When it creates desires based upon its wrong judgments, such as when it believes in the reality of an ego substance and becomes attached to it as the ultimate truth. For manas is not only a discriminating intelligence, but a willing agency, and consequently an actor. In these activities manas is always found in company with manovijnana. In fact, it may be more proper to say that manas and manovijnana conjointly working produce the world of particulars. And when reference is made to vastu prativikalpa vijnana, it includes both manas and manovijnana. The function of manovijnana is by hypothesis to reflect on manas, as the eye vijnana reflects on the world of forms and the ear vijnana on that of sounds. But in fact, as soon as manas evolves the dualism of subject and object out of the absolute unity of the alaya, manovijnana and indeed all the other vijnanas begin to operate. It is like a complicated machine now. The whole system of the vijnanas, each singly and also conjointly with others, is set in motion. When the system is thus in full swing, we cannot distinguish one vijnana from another. They so intimately interact, and the mirroring alaya is not distinguishable from the discriminating manas and from the other vijnanas, reflecting, reasoning, desiring, and acting. The kyati and the vastu prativikalpa have now no differentiating marks, they react upon each other, the one acting in turn as the cause to the other. In the beginning there was the memory amassed in the alaya since the beginningless past as a latent cause, in which the whole universe of individual objects lies with its eyes closed. Here enters manas with its discriminating intelligence, and subject is distinguished from object. Manovijnana reflects on the duality, and from it issues a whole train of judgments with the consequent prejudices and attachments, while the five other vijnanas force them to become more and more complicated not only intellectually but effectively and cognitively. All the results of these activities in turn perfume the alaya, stimulating the old memory to wake while the new one finds its affinities among the old. In the meantime, however, the alaya itself remains unmoved, retaining its identity. The following extracts from the Lankavatara elucidate for us the relation between the alaya and the other vijnanas and also that between manovijnana, including manas, and the remaining part of the vijnana system. When the Buddha said that Buddhist nirvana consisted in turning away from the wrongfully discriminating manovijnana, Mahamati asked, "O Blessed One, dost thou not establish 8 vijnanas?" Being assured of this, Mahamati proceeded, "If this be the case, why dost thou not speak of one's turning away from the 7 vijnanas instead of manovijnana?" The Buddha answered to the following effect. With manovijnana as cause and support, there takes place the evolution of the 7 vijnanas. Further, O Mahamati, when manovijnana discerns and clings to an external world of particulars, all kinds of habit energy are generated therefrom, and by them the alaya is nurtured. Together with the thought of me and mine, taking hold of it and clinging to it, and reflecting upon it, manas thereby takes shape and is evolved. In substance, however, manas and manovijnana are not different the one from the other, they depend upon the alaya as cause and support. And when an external world is tenaciously held as real, which is no other than the presentation of one's own mind, the mentation system, mutually related, is evolved in its totality. Like the ocean waves, O Mahamati, the vijnanas set in motion by the wind of an external world which is the manifestation of one's own mind, rise and cease. Therefore, O Mahamati, the 7 vijnanas cease with the cessation of manovijnana. Thus it is said, my nirvana has nothing to do with substance, nor with action, nor with appearance. 1 With the cessation of the vijnana which is caused by discrimination, there is my cessation I. Nirvana. Depending upon it as cause and support, the whole system of mentation finds its refuge here. The vijnana supplies cause to the mind and is its dependent. As when the great flood runs its course there are no more waves, so with the extinction of manovijnana all the vijnanas cease to rise. Single quote. The above shows the importance of the manovijnana in the body of vijnanas including the alaya. Let us now proceed to see what role the alaya, besides supplying material to the activity of the manovijnana, plays, or rather how it stands by itself, especially in connection with the idea of the Tathagata Garbha. The following will be of great help to our understanding the significance of the alaya, which is needed in the bringing about of an inner experience known as pratyatmajnanadagama. O Mahamati, the Tathagata Garbha contains in itself causes alike good and not good, and from which are generated all paths of existence. It is like an actor playing different characters without harboring any thought of me and mine. From not comprehending this, there arises the union and interaction of three causes producing results. The philosophers not understanding this become attached to the fixed idea of a creator. Infused with the habit energy of various kinds of speculations and errors which have been carried on since beginningless time, the name of alaya vijnana obtains, as alaya means all-conserving. It is in company with the 7 vijnanas which are generated in the dwelling house of ignorance. The body of the vijnanas is stirred uninterruptedly and all the time like the waves of the great ocean. But the alaya itself is free from the fault of impermanence and devoid of the thought of ego and is in its ultimate substance perfectly immaculate. As to the other 7 vijnanas beginning with manas and manovijnana, they originate and come to an end and are characterized by momentariness. This is due to our erroneously discriminating things that are not. They are intimately related to and dependent upon an external world of forms and images. Tenaciously attached to names and appearances, they fail to comprehend that forms and appearances are manifestations of the mind. They do not realize what is pain and what pleasure. They are no producers of emancipation firmly standing on names and appearances as realities, they are begotten of the desire to have and further beget the same desire. The desire and the vijnanas are thus mutually conditioning. When what are known as the perceiving senses are destroyed and disappear, others vijnanas, immediately following this, cease to function. There is still a self-discriminating knowledge. And seeing that no pain, no pleasure is felt, that there follows the extinction of thought and sensation, and the attainment of mental tranquility and the 4 jhanas. Together with skillfulness in the understanding of truth and emancipation, the devotees think that they have really attained emancipation. But as long as the alaya vijnana known by the name of Tathagata Garbha is not set in motion and differently oriented, the cessation of the 7 evolving vijnanas will never take place. Why? Because, depending on the alaya as cause, the vijnanas are evolved. Because this is not within the reach of all sravakas, pratyeka Buddhas, philosophers, and yoga devotees. Because while they understand that there is no ego substance in a person, they are still attached to the ideas of individuality and generality as really existing in the skandhas, dhehatas, and ayatanas. The Tathagata Garbha is awakened and grows quiescent as one perceives what is meant by the 5 dharmas, 3 svabhavas, and the non-existence of ego substance in particular objects. And when there takes place the revulsion in the alaya by gradually ascending the steps of perfection, i.e. dasabhumika, a man will never be led astray by the methods and views held by the philosophers. The Tathagata Garbha is found united with the 7 vijnanas. From attachment duality sets in, from knowledge it disappears. The mind is to be regarded as mirror-like, perfumed by speculation habit since the beginningless past. When things are truly observed, they are not as they appear. As the ignorant see the fingertip and not the moon, so those who are addicted to letters understand not the thatness of the things I teach. The mind dances like the dancer, Manas resembles the jester or companion actor, the vijnana, in company with the five, imagines the visible world as a stage. Single quote. The function of Manas. The question may rise now, what is the significance of Manas? Cannot the other vijnanas do without this one acting, as it were, between the alaya and the other particularizing six vijnanas? This seems to be quite a natural question to ask, seeing that the manovijnana can directly deal with the alaya without the interference of Manas. According to my way of interpreting the Lankavatara, which may not be correct, the alaya is a sort of universal consciousness, and Manas individual empirical consciousness. In the alaya everything is stored, good and bad, i.e., a state of quiescence and potentiality, but no discrimination, which latter, however, appears with the initiation of Manas. Manas is the active source of all the mental activities we ordinarily experience in this world of particulars. The possibility of consciousness lies in its dualistic nature, for without that which grasps and that which is grasped, there will be no conscious life. The duality of subject and object is fundamental, but this dualism is impossible without assuming behind it something which is not dual. Therefore, at the back of the six vijnanas there must be Manas, the principle of individuation, and also the alaya, which goes even beyond the foundation of consciousness. When we admit that the six vijnanas are fundamentally conditional by the principle of individuation, we admit the existence of Manas. And when Manas is admitted, we inevitably go on to the alaya, which allows itself to be reflected by Manas as its condition and yet at the same time transcends it, because the alaya is not an individual object of experience but universal in its nature. And it is owing to this universal nature of the alaya that all the individual Manas are capable of reflecting one and the same universe and of engaging in discussion. The alaya is thus most appropriately compared to the ocean. This ocean of the alaya is disturbed by the wind of the particularizing principle, psychologically known as Manas and epistemologically as Vishaya. While Manas is conceptually separable from the other six vijnanas, it is practically involved in them. In our psychological life itself the whole vijnana system is engaged, and we cannot very well talk individually of its components. So the Lankavatara is always careful to guard us from getting confused about this point. The alaya and the vijnanas are different and yet not different, i.e. 1. Without the alaya, the cause disappears and the whole mental apparatus collapses. And when that which makes the cause operative ceases to react, the cause itself ceases to act, though this does not mean its disappearance or destruction. The Manas is the discriminating agency. But as this is possible only in the alaya, on which Manas with all its retinue of vijnanas is dependent, the Manas and the alaya are in the closest possible relationship. For this reason, the alaya is dependent upon Manas for consciousness of itself and its unity. On the other hand, the six vijnanas cannot function in harmony with one another unless Manas comes between them and the alaya. Manas is the connecting link. The position occupied by Manas in the system of vijnanas is thus peculiarly complicated and is apt to get confused sometimes with the alaya and sometimes with manovijnana. In the Lankavatara, the alaya is the reservoir of things good and bad, but it is perfectly neutral and not conscious of itself, as there is as yet no differentiation in it. The differentiation is caused by Manas, the defiling vijnana as it is sometimes called. The differentiation or defilement itself is neither good nor bad. But when it is adhered to as final, irreducible reality, there ensues the idea of an ego substance internally and externally, and from this all evils are generated. As a result, the mind loses its native tranquility. What is now most needed is to cause a revolution in the whole system of vijnanas, especially in the alaya itself, which, contaminated by manas and manovijnana, has had its neutrality, purity, and innocence all exiled. To look into the matter squarely and clearly is called to see yathabhutam by direct perception, which leads to emancipation and serenity. To summarize, the alaya is mind in its deepest and most comprehensive sense. While it manifests itself as individualized in our empirical consciousness and as subject to the momentary changes that are taking place in him, it never loses its identity and eternality. In this respect, it is different from the Atman or ego, which is regarded by the ignorant as something like the alaya. Though it is pure and immaculate in its original nature, it allows itself to be affected by manas, the principle of individuation. And thus affected the dualism of subject and object is created in it, which issues in the appearance of a world of particular objects. The latter comes in contact with the 5 sense vijnanas. And all the impressions gained from this contact are presented to manovijnana, which is a sort of doorkeeper between manas and the 5 vijnanas. All the impression and reports gathered at manovijnana are here classified according to the categories of me and not me, this being the function of manovijnana given by manas. The authority of manas thus increased by its faithful servant and backed inwardly by the presence of the alaya, gains strength in the conviction that there is an ego on the one hand and an objective world and all its reality on the other hand. From the disciplinary point of view, the most refractory agent is manas supported by manovijnana. When this pair, especially manovijnana, is put back to its proper function and made to see things in their true bearings inwardly as well as outwardly, the vijnana system ceases to be an evil creating machine and becomes the storage of things good and pure. Let us conclude this paragraph with a quotation on the Buddhist doctrine of momentariness. Where are 8 vijnanas? The Tathagata Gava, known under the name of alaya vijnana, manas, manovijnana, and the 5 sense vijnanas grouped together as is pointed out by the philosophers. This system of the 5 sense vijnanas is in union with manovijnana, and this mutuality makes the system distinguish between what is good and what is not good, etc. And further being bound up together so closely and continuously, the vijnana system evolves as one solid undivided body. The evolution thus goes on, but when the nature of a visible world is not understood as mind, there is a constant rise and disappearance of the vijnanas. Manovijnana in union with the 5 sense vijnanas grasps forms and appearances in their multitudinous aspect. And there is not a moment's cessation of activity. This I call the momentary character of the vijnanas. There is this momentariness again, O Mahamati, when the Tathagata Gava, known under the name of the alaya vijnana, in union with manas, is together with the memories of the evolute vijnanas. If, on the other hand, it is together with those free from evil outflowings, there is no momentariness. This is found hard to understand for the ignorant who are addicted to the doctrine of momentariness, as they do not understand what is meant by the momentariness and the not momentariness of all things. They cherish a nihilistic view of existence, and are apt to regard things belonging to the category of uncreates as subject to destruction. O Mahamati, the body of the 5 sense vijnanas is exempt from transmigration, is not susceptible to pleasure and pain, and has nothing to do with the attainment of nirvana. It is the Tathagata Gava, O Mahamati, that is affected by pleasure and pain, becomes the cause of nirvana. is subject to evolution and disappearance, and becomes stupefied by the four kinds of habit energy. The ignorant do not understand this because they are infected by discrimination, which is based on the view of momentariness. Again, O Mahamati, gold, diamond, and the Buddha's Sarira bony relics equally pass through ages of existence and show the unique character of indestructibility. If the wise who have attained enlightenment have the nature of momentariness, they must be said to be lacking in wisdom. Gold and diamond, however long they may be in existence, remain the same. They show no sign of increase or decrease. How can the ignorant be expected to understand my esoteric doctrine, who, discriminating in all things inner and outer, cherish the thought of momentariness? Single quote. These long passages, occasionally deeply involved in obscurity, have been quoted partly to describe the relation between the various vijnanas as a system, and partly, also, to present the Mahayana Buddhist view of momentarism as regards the Tathagata Gava or alaya vijnana. The gathas at the end of this chapter on Kajanikam are to be replaced immediately after the above quotation and not after the account of the 6 virtues of perfection as they stand now in the original texts, Sanskrit and Chinese. The awakening of prajna. How do we now get prajna awakened in order to see into the true state of things, yathabhutam? Where does this prajna come, and how do we attain self-realization by directly experiencing the truth? And what is the truth? The sutra refers constantly to prapathika, parikalpa, vikalpa, abhinivasa, bhranti, daushthulya, vasana, etc., which are tossing up the roaring waves over the alaya ocean. But when does pratyatmariyana get its start so that the stormy sea will grow calm and the world be perceived without discrimination or disturbance of any kind? Why, says the sutra, the bodhisattva who aims to be great in his spiritual discipline is required to be perfect in the following 4 things. He must have a penetrating comprehension as regards the nature of the manifestation of mind. He must be free from such notions as birth, abiding, and destruction. He must observe that external objects do not exist. And he must earnestly desire a state of realization by directly seeing into the inmost self. How can this be achieved? If it were due to the appearance of the principle of particularization or discrimination that the alaya ceases to be the seat of Tathagatahood, and if without this principle no sentient beings could ever come to the perception of the alaya even in its disturbed, distorted, and altogether false reflections, it must be again this principle that will set us aright in the position that we may have a correct view of alaya. In other words, if it were the work of manas and manovijnana that an external world came to be recognized as external, it must be their work again, properly executed this time, that we come to look at the world as having evolved out of our own being. Formerly, the vijnana was wrongly attached to the principle of particularization and thus to the undesirable part of the vasana, memory, in the alaya. There must be a turning of the waves. The course of manas and manovijnana must be altered towards another direction than that which has been pursued hitherto. If we all thought of the alaya as external and subject to changes, we must now retrace our steps and look within ourselves and see if there is anything that transcends the principle of particularization. To transcend this principle, that is, for manas and manovijnana to transcend themselves, means the obliteration of themselves, their disappearance from the field of operation, the transcending of the dualism of grahya and grahaka, of sat and asat, one and many, particularity and generality. When this is accomplished, where do we find ourselves? Where is the ultimate abiding place for us? This is the abode of Tathagatahood. and belongs to the realm of alaya vijnana to be known as tathagata gava, and realizable only through immediate perception. For this no more belongs to the sphere of logic and analysis, but is an experience attained immediately within oneself. A knowledge that is not of particularization and discrimination must be one of direct experience in which the alaya reveals itself in its original purity and not in its distorted and defiled forms as it ordinarily does to the vijnanas. When we thus come to have an immediate knowledge of transcendental nature, the vijnana system will cease to be treated psychologically. We have now to return to the chapter preceding this, where the so-called logical aspect of the inner experience is treated. The awakening of prajna, which is dynamic rather than non-discriminative knowledge beyond the realm of mentation, is a practical question in the Lankavatara, and this will be treated in what is to follow. Part 3. Self-discipline and adhisthana. The logical and psychological equipment must be followed up by practical discipline, without which the bodhisattva could not be more than an idealistic philosopher. As all the sacred doctrines leave no room for option and doubt as to the import of self-discipline, let the bodhisattva retire into a quiet and solitary place and reflect within himself by means of the intelligence which lies in his inmost mind, not to be led by anybody else. Then he will be able to free himself from views based upon discrimination and by degrees advance towards the state of tathagatahood. This not depending upon another is emphasized not only in Mahayana literature but in the Agamas or Nikayas. For Buddhism is emphatically the doctrine of enlightenment which is to be realized within oneself. So, it is urged for the bodhisattva who wishes to penetrate behind the screen of contrasts and dialectics that he should rid himself of all the hindrances that may arise from noisy confusion, from heaviness of mind, and from sleepiness, and also that he should assiduously engage in disciplining himself throughout the night, not at all mindful of the philosophies of other schools, including the Hinayanist. Can the bodhisattva, however, reach his goal by his own effort and without any outside assistance? Is there really no other power that will come to his help? Here we have